founders are relying on intuition to decide what is and isn't working in their marketing. The truth is that gut feel is not really a growth strategy. And I want to give you an example from our business where we ran an experiment. We compared 3 different sales processes. You see, I thought that we'd come up with a genius sales process idea, but basically the data told us a different story. And I think this is the main challenge that I see in a lot of businesses that I work with, is that when you hire a marketing manager, they come from creative backgrounds. They're great at ideas, they're great at writing copy, they're great at design, they're great at logos, all of that stuff. But creative on its own, in its own silo, doesn't drive predictable growth. So real growth happens when you can combine creativity with the structure and measurement of engineering principles. You've got the creative side of figuring out what are we trying to say here, what's our messaging, what's our positioning, how are we going to create this piece of content, and that's really fun. And then you've got the engineering side, which is taking that creativity and putting structure around it. And rather than just going ahead with creativity, you're thinking about how do we build a growth system? And this is the shift that I feel we should make as business people, right? We should stop treating growth like a creative problem or a set of tactics and start seeing it as an engineering problem, a system problem. And so if you think about it, what is a business in its essence? It's a cash machine. It's designed to produce cash flow. And so if we start tracking the actions that help us produce the most cash, then our business is going to get more and more optimized over time. It sounds really simple, right? Sounds really obvious, but I can honestly tell you that it took me years to learn how to do this as a business person. But what I've noticed is that once you start measuring the right things, then the answers start to become very obvious in terms of what you should do next. And it also makes the whole process of running your business a lot less stressful. So what you're going to see here is 3 different versions of a sales process that we used to basically sell our consulting program, which is a program where people work directly with us to help them grow their business. We help them with strategy and their messaging and which channels they should use, et cetera, et cetera. We give them all of our internal IP, our playbooks, our guides, our AI tools, and all that kind of good stuff. And then we also give them access to the talent that they need to grow their business. So the first one we tried was just a 1-call sales process where we had a call with the customer. We went through the whole sales process on that 1 call. And at the end of the call, we told them about how the program works. And we gave them an opportunity to sign up for that program. Now, this did not perform very well at all. It might be that I'm not a good salesperson, but ultimately, this did not perform particularly well at all. And we decided to cancel it very, very quickly once we started it. So that left us with 2 more sales processes. I'm going to start with the third one here because this is a more traditional sales process that you would see in a B2B organization. So we had an initial call, which was almost like a discovery, initial kind of get to know each other chat. And then if the client was a good fit, we would book them in for a second call. And then in the second call, it was a bit more of a kind of action plan demo call where we would kind of present back our findings after doing an audit. And then we would give them the opportunity to then sign up for our program. And the first step of the program is a workshop. So it's a one-on-one workshop with me where we would go into real detail on their business and their ideal customers, the transformation that they're providing their customers, and some of the messaging and the unique insights that we can share with people. So it's a really value-packed workshop. And that's always been the first step of any of our new engagements, really. And so what I looked at this process, and the challenge with this sometimes is obviously you spend a lot of time with someone and then obviously not everyone ends up in the program. So what will often happen is you have an initial call, you then do a bunch of work and do an audit, and then you have a second call. And obviously not everyone is ending up in the program. So sometimes that feels a bit galling. It feels like you've given loads of energy and effort into a process. You've given someone tons of value. You feel like they're a great fit, and then they don't decide to work with you for whatever reason. Sometimes they don't even come back to you, and that's kind of frustrating. So I was looking at this and I was thinking, okay, how can we simplify this? And I had what I thought was a real brainwave. Like I thought this was really genius, to be honest with you, which is to basically take that workshop and have it as an initial paid session, which comes straight after the first call. And then obviously within that paid session, obviously the customer gets tons of value either way, but then ultimately we can use it to upsell them to the main program in a tasteful way. And so I thought this was genius because it means we can go back to having 1 call closes. we can just close them on the initial workshop, and then that gives us more time with them. They get a ton of value from us. They love that session. Everyone loves these workshops. They love the session. They get to the end excited to grow their business. And then it's an obvious move for us to help them kind of put that action plan into practice. So I actually thought this was a really genius idea. I thought I was being an absolute wizard by putting this into our sales process. And everyone I mentioned it to said, oh, that sounds like a really, really smart idea. It sounds really clever, kind of really Alex Hormozy style. Get them in there and then upsell them and so on and so forth. And I'm curious, I'm about to look at the data now. Which one of these processes do you think was the best overall? Here's the big reveal. And what I'm going to show you is the actual data from our business that we've tracked over the last couple of months and show you what it means in practice. So we have the straight into the program with one call. I tested this on 5 different leads or 5 different calls, and none of them became customers. So very quickly, I decided to can that and move on to the other 2 options. So we have the one call that goes straight to the workshop, and then we have the program, which is a 2-call close into the program. And you can see how many calls we had and how many were close won and how many end up being close lost. And what you can see is we had a 37% win rate on the workshop. So that's a pretty good win rate. You know, anything over 20% is considered pretty strong within a B2B context. And you can see on average, we collected this much cash in the first 30 days working with the new customer. And on average, the whole sales process took about 2.5 hours, which includes initial call, and we included some of the workshop within that. I won't bore you with the details. We included some of the workshop within that, but not the whole workshop within that. And so in terms of our sales time per hour, we were getting about £824 of sales time per hour, which sounds good, eh? Like that sounds good. We're closing at 40% and we're getting £824 per hour of our sales time. Then I looked at the program with the 2-call close, okay? And what's really interesting here, by the way, the reason that these numbers don't add up is that there's some that are still open. So not all of these 19 leads are either closed, lost, or closed won. But you can see, so we closed 8. We've lost 7 so far. So actually, of the deals that have closed, we're closing more than 50% on the 2-call close. And actually, interestingly, the cash collected from these deals is higher on average in the first 30 days. And it takes less of our sales time in order to get someone into the program. And so ultimately, we're more than double the amount of money per hour of sales time, right? So for every hour that I'm spending on sales, I'm getting twice the amount of cash into our business. And so if we think about this in terms of optimizing around how can we maximize the amount of cash coming into our business, suddenly this 2-call program, this 2-call process is a really obvious fit for our business. And actually what I'm seeing here is we're closing at more than 50% on these calls, which is a clear sign to me that we really need to increase our pricing. So, you know, within the next few days or the next week or so, we'll definitely be increasing our price point as well, which ultimately will probably lead to even more cash being collected overall in the first 30 days. So this was a really eye-opening and interesting to me, because if you would have said to me, and if I would base this on my gut feel, my intuition, I would have probably said that the workshop with the 1-call close is the best fit overall because it just feels seamless. But actually, if you look at the data, the 2-call close is a lot better. So that's a real tangible example of how we used this whole philosophy in our business and actually what it looked like in practice and what the end result was. So that's the big takeaway really from this video, I hope for you, is that if you start to think of your marketing as a growth machine rather than just marketing tactics and we need to do this tactic and that tactic, I believe you'll see much better results overall. So there's a 4-step process you can follow. The first is to map your funnel. So make sure you know what the customer journey is and you can visualize that in one clear funnel. And second is to start tracking key metrics at each stage of that process. So we're thinking about 1 or maybe 2 metrics at each stage of that process. You don't need a fancy software. You don't need a fancy dashboard to do this. A simple Google Sheet is fine. You can start with the classic metrics of cost per lead, obviously conversion rate on sales process, close rate. You can look at what we looked at, which is $1 per hour of salesperson time. And then step 3 is you're going to form a simple hypothesis in terms of how you can improve your system. So you're going to ask yourself, what happens if we double the number of calls that we're getting? Does that double ultimately the revenue that we're generating overall? What happens if we change our sales process here? What happens if we add another stage here, etc., etc., whatever your hypothesis is. And then the key here is to define success. Make sure you know how you're going to measure success over the next 30, 60, 90 days, or however long you're measuring it for. And then just create a simple scorecard and review those metrics weekly. So don't treat it like art. Don't do it based on gut feel, and treat it like performance data that you can really learn from. So those 4 steps are mapping your funnel, track 1 or 2 metrics per stage, form a simple hypothesis, and then create a simple scorecard and measure the data weekly. And that alone is going to give you so much clarity and so much peace of mind when it comes to growing your business. And that would be probably my big takeaway here, is to focus on that peace of mind. What I've noticed is that the founders and the business people who are really scaling their business, it's not usually due to them trying harder. It's usually due to them being smarter. And I know in our business, whenever I feel like I'm really grinding away, or I'm doing too many things, or I'm trying too hard, and it feels a bit random, like my growth feels a bit random, it's because I'm not tracking things properly and I'm not thinking about it in terms of a system. So the solution is simple. Measure one thing, improve it, and then move on to the next thing. Figure out where the biggest bottleneck is in your business, measure some data against that bottleneck, improve it over time, and then move on to the next. And if you approach business in this way, trust me, it makes it a lot less stressful. So hopefully this has been a really useful video. If you want help building your growth machine, there'll be a link somewhere. You can book a call with me. We'll talk about your business and see if we can potentially help you do that. Either way, I hope this was a super useful video, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks so much.